Whether you're in a traditional 2 running back format or a 3 wide receiver league like a best ball league, I personally feel like missing on a running back is the most frustrating thing that happens on a yearly basis to every fantasy football manager. For me personally, whether you invest in a 2 running back league and you get both running backs high and one of them misses, or even if you're going with a 0 RB strategy in a wide receiver 3 format and that first guy you take doesn't hit, it's equally as frustrating either way. So what I wanted to do to kind of minimize that likelihood of us busting on our first or second running back we take is I took a 10-year study here and I found out the guys that did not repeat the following year that they were top 12 guys, and I found some big takeaways here that we need to go through to establish who the most dangerous running backs are in 2024 fantasy football. But first, please go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because this took me days to put together here. So like I said, I went through the past 10 seasons, dating back to 2014, and I looked at every single top 12 running back in fantasy football. Now, of course, there was plenty of running backs who were repeat guys on a yearly basis for a long time. Like guys like Le'Veon Bell was a repeat guy. Marshawn Lynch was a repeat guy. A lot of guys on this list were repeat guys. I don't care about finding those guys and what the details are about them. I'm trying to isolate the guys who didn't repeat because I want to avoid making that mistake. So I put together that full list of guys who did not repeat the following season that they were top 12 guys. And as you can see on the list right here on the screen, it's a lot of guys right here. There's a ton of guys, and I went through every single thing that they logged the following year after that top 12 season, including the running back finish that they had. And what I found out was, a lot of these guys, they were either RB2s or RB3s the following year, so it wasn't like they gave you bad production, right? It wasn't like they were just totally tanking your team and they did nothing. Like, I didn't find a lot of that, aside from the guys who got injured and missed more than 3/4 of the season. Those are the guys that I excluded from this list. Anybody who was injured and missed more than 3/4 of a particular season, I did not count those guys and hold that against them. I'm only counting guys who played at least 12 to 13 games in a particular fantasy football season. And as you can see, a lot of these guys, running back 2s still, running back 3s, some of them were like RB13, RB14. So it was like they were barely outside the top 12 running backs here. And of course, all of these guys experienced some combination of lower volume, lower efficiency, or lower touchdowns scored the following season. That's a pretty obvious thing. Like, there's nothing groundbreaking about the fact that they may have seen less volume or just weren't as efficient getting in the end zone or on their yards per carry basis. There's nothing groundbreaking about that. So the real question comes down to, how can you predict that they will see one of those things, either less volume or less efficiency here? This took me a while to kind of figure out, and it may sound relatively obvious when you put it all together. And when I did, it made a lot of sense. So I started out by looking at a buildup of the volume leading up to the year where they were first outside the top 12 for these guys, and there was really no consistent correlation. What I was able to find here was that out of all the guys on this list, there was a striking 64.3% of them that experienced a coaching change or a team change the following year where they did not become top 12 running backs again. That is a very, very big number right there. A lot of these guys that came onto this list were big free agent signings. Guys like DeMarco Murray, when he went to Philadelphia. That was a big deal back in the 2014 era. If you remember, and if you were playing in fantasy football at that time, we were all excited about DeMarco Murray to the Eagles at that time. Leonard Fournette to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was also a big deal at the time. Didn't exactly work out in fantasy football. Now, of course, there were a lot of guys who did not go to a different team change, and some of them didn't even have a coaching change either. And we'll get to those guys here in just a little bit here, but it is very, very important to note that there were 64.3% of these guys on this entire list that experienced either a coaching change or they experienced a complete team change and went to a different team. Now, the coaching changes that I'm assessing here was either a change of the head coach or the offensive coordinator. And of course, if they had both, that was obviously going to be a major outcome. And the reason I say this may come out as relatively obvious when you actually put it together is obviously the offensive coordinator / the head coach. They have a big effect on how plays are being called, on what personnel they prefer. Because some of the guys on this list, they just didn't fit the system that the new coach brought in, and so they were not nearly as relevant and lost volume as a result. Now, some other guys who experienced the coaching change, they were still the team's running back one, but they weren't nearly as important in that system that the new coach brought in. So a coaching change is going to affect these guys drastically to a 64% hit rate of missing out on a top 12 season the following year. Now let's go through the guys really quick that were not affected by either a team change or a coaching change, but still finished outside of the top 12 running backs the following year that they were top 12 running backs. So obviously, I'm looking for what's the connection here with all these guys. Now, what I found was, again, very, very interesting on this one in particular. I found that 60% of these guys were within their first or last 3 years of their career. So they were either coming into their own as an NFL running back, or they were exiting the back half of their career and they were about to be done in fantasy football, so they just experienced that natural decline. In other words, the thing I'm trying to portray here with that particularly is that there were not many guys that all of a sudden in the middle of their prime just like dropped out of top 12. There were not many guys that did that in any particular season. There just weren't many guys that did that out of the guys that didn't experience a coaching change or a team change entirely. So we've got some parameters to work on right here. We're looking for guys who are really in the prime of their careers right now, or they didn't experience any kind of coaching change or any kind of team change. Now, here's the problem with a lot of the top 12 running backs that we saw in 2023 fantasy football. Out of the top 12 running backs, there was 8 running backs that fit this criteria. That makes a lot of these guys pretty dangerous running back options here. Now again, am I saying that all these 8 guys are dropping out of the top 12? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's not 100% data. It's above 60% data on everything that I counted, but it is not 100%, and we cannot rely on this data to say, yeah, I need to be out on this particular player or player Y or player Z. I'm not saying that. I'm telling you that these guys did fit the parameters of this data research right here, and that could pose a problem here because of draft price and other factors right here. So the guys that I have flagged right here are Raheem Mostert, Joe Mixon, Kyren Williams, Rachaad White, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, James Cook, and Saquon Barkley. Now, some of these guys have an age issue. Raheem Mostert has an age issue. He's going to be 32 years old at the start of the season. Now, he more so fits along the lines of guys who I believe are exiting into the last 3 years of their career. There's no coaching change. That's significant in Miami. Offensive coach is intact. Mike McDaniel is intact. Nothing to worry about at the coaching front. It's an age thing here for me, though. Joe Mixon, coaching change and 28 years old. So he's got kind of a double whammy going on here with Joe Mixon in particular. That makes me nervous with Joe Mixon. Kyren Williams, interestingly enough, in his third year, coming into his third year, and strangely so, the Rams added a new offensive coordinator, although Sean McVay was the offensive coordinator for years. So Mike LaFleur is coming in as that offensive coordinator, shifting up the coaching staff. Again, I don't know whether or not it's a good or bad thing, but it's worth noting here because it fits the criteria. Rachaad White, coaching change. Dave Canales is no longer as the offensive coordinator there. Derrick Henry, coaching change and team change. Bijan Robinson, coaching change. James Cook, coaching change. And Saquon Barkley, team change entirely. So again, I'm not saying that all of these guys are going to be problems, right? In fact, what I'm about to show you is who I prefer and who I don't prefer out of this list of guys, and I'll explain why I think that we can overlook the dangers or we need to take these dangers into account, because the bottom line is they're all flagged here because they do fit the danger zone of guys who have potential to drop out of top 12 status the following year, which will be in 2024 fantasy football. So here's the guys that I just do not like. The guys I do not like and I have the most concerns with: Raheem Mostert, Joe Mixon, and yes, Saquon Barkley. Let me start out with Raheem Mostert. It's an age thing entirely for me, and all we've seen from Raheem Mostert most of his career is the inability to play a full 16 to 17 game span. Last year was an outlier year for Raheem Mostert. At his underdog price of RB28 and 96 overall, I have taken him, and I still will take him. But I am more interested in drafting his backup, Jalen Wright, because I just do not believe that we see many running backs, based on history, that make it past this age and are still top 12 guys in fantasy football. Joe Mixon is experiencing a coaching change and the age problem here with the Houston Texans. Add on top of the fact that Houston has said publicly, well, we kind of like the idea of a two running back strategy. We'll see how that works out in September, but it's also worth noting that this team is going to be absolutely pass first. So a new coaching change, we'll see what their philosophy is, but it does not look like they intend to give Joe Mixon the amount of touches that the Bengals gave him. And Saquon Barkley. If you recall, some of you may recall this, I made a video about 2 months back actually, discussing why I believe we're getting Saquon Barkley's price wrong. 21 overall ADP, and he's the running back 6 off the board in underdog drafts. I have not changed this opinion. I still believe we're getting this wrong. Saquon Barkley, in that video, I highlighted the issues with a running quarterback that running backs experience. With Jalen Hurts in particular, he will struggle to get touchdowns rushing, and he will struggle to get targets per game. Because running backs with running quarterbacks just do not get the targets per game that they would with a Jared Goff or with a Joe Burrow. Saquon Barkley also comes in, clear coaching change, and I just wanted to note this really quick. The Philadelphia Eagles, on the list of guys who had a team change, the Philadelphia Eagles as a team were responsible for knocking 3 previous running back 12s out of the top 12 status the following year when they joined the new team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Do I think that's actually relevant here? No. I'm really just joking around with that bit of information, but it just goes to show Saquon Barkley, to me, I'm going to double down again in saying I believe he's a very risky pick, and I don't particularly love the upside here, especially at cost with Saquon Barkley. Now, the guys I really, really like, Bijan Robinson and James Cook. Bijan Robinson, I think the coaching change is for the better, and he's coming into the prime of his career. James Cook, I feel very similarly. Coaching change actually helps him because we saw it last year when they got rid of Ken Dorsey and they brought on Joe Brady to be the play caller. That's when James Cook did his best work in 2023 fantasy football. So now he gets a full year of Joe Brady. I actually have more faith in him being a top 10 guy than I did last year with James Cook. And Bijan Robinson, all we've heard all offseason, they're going to give the guy the ball a ton. So I have a lot of confidence in those guys, and I endorse drafting him on underdog today. And Derrick Henry. I do believe in Derrick Henry, which is so hilarious because it's so counterintuitive to what I say about Saquon Barkley with Jalen Hurts. Here's the difference, though. With Jalen Hurts, he's a legitimate threat to get goal line carries and shark them away from Saquon Barkley. Red zone carries are a legitimate threat with Jalen Hurts. They are not a legitimate threat with Lamar Jackson. And if you want to see exactly why, go back to that video I did on Saquon Barkley, and you'll see that Lamar Jackson's running backs over the past 4 to 5 years, they're all running back 10 touchdown type of guys on the ground. Why is that? Because Lamar Jackson has a thinner frame. They don't want to run him at the goal line and risk him getting hurt on a quarterback sneak. The success he sees running the ball is in space, where he can make guys miss or he can run out of bounds. Jalen Hurts is different. He's a different character. They can comfortably run him up the middle because they not only have the tush push, which has a 93% success rate, but he's also a bigger guy as well. I actually believe Derrick Henry could lead the league in touchdowns this year. I 100% do. Rushing touchdowns, I think Derrick Henry could lead it. So I don't have a problem with Derrick Henry's price. I actually really like Derrick Henry. And Kyren Williams and Rachaad White, I'm very, very mixed emotions on. Kyren Williams, I don't see them making a drastic change because of how good he was for them. This was not a normal run-of-the-mill season for a running back. He was excellent. So even with the coaching change and even with the addition of Blake Corum, I still lean on the side of him being a top 12 guy. Rachaad White is the ultimate boomer bust guy to me right now. I've drafted him. I see the upside. I included him in the video of potential unsuspecting league-winning running backs right now because he fit the criteria and he's going as the RB15 at a 65 ADP. Price is good, but no Dave Canales. That's a big deal. That's a big, big deal. So I'm very indifferent on those two guys in particular, but I can tell you right now, I have issues with Raheem Mostert and Joe Mixon and Saquon Barkley, even though it's a very unpopular opinion. So let me know what you think of the research in the comments below and who your guy is at running back in 2024 fantasy football.